Good morning, everyone. I was waiting until we had a certain number to get into the meeting today. My name is S. Lisa Herndon, and I'm a member of the Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors Board of Directors. And I also serve as a member on the CAAR, Virginia Realtors and National Association of Realtors Diversity and Inclusion Committee. It's important to know that CAAR is committed to modeling diversity and inclusion for the entire community and to maintaining an inclusive environment with equitable treatment for all. To challenge ourselves to be better, CAAR is committed to bringing influential speakers to broaden our mindset and change the way we think or approach issues and situations. I would like to officially welcome you to How to Have Difficult Conversations Around Race or any differences for that matter with Leslie Frazier. She's Senior Vice President of Community and Industry Relations of Virginia Realtors. Your presence this morning shows that you want to take an active role to be better, which includes how to listen, to understand, and appreciate differences. I would like to acknowledge and thank our collaboration partners, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers Realtist Chapter of Richmond. This is the second event we have collaborated on this year. If you by chance missed the June 3rd event with Dr. Jane Saunders, one of the authors of Urban Renewal and the End of Black Culture in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Oral History on Vinegar Hill, you can watch this session on CAAR's YouTube channel. The link has been shared in the Zoom chat window. A link to today's handouts has also been shared in the Zoom chat window. Before I pass the session on to Katrina Tyree, President of NARAD Realist Chapter of Richmond, we are going to share a few minutes of a video on the history of NARAD.
Going back to 1947, NARAD was founded because African Americans could not be members of NAR, at that time. And so there were a number of local real estate, African American real estate trade associations around the country who decided to come together and form a national organization.
We would be accused of blockbustering. You see, and introducing, I know we had a case in Atlanta where we were charged with introducing some disruptive kind of residents in white areas when we would sell a black person a house in a white neighborhood.
When they opened it up, the women could go in and sell. Most of the men could not. They did have a problem with black men. I think they were still kind of frightened.
To join together black real estate professionals and to fight for the rights of African American homeowners, 12 people founded the National Association of Real Estate Brokers in Tampa, Florida, July 1947. The NAREB developed out of the National Negro Business League, whose founder was educator Booker T. Washington. W.D. Morrison of Detroit was NAREB's first president. The group called itself NAREB and its members Realtists, and established its motto in the 1950s, democracy in housing.
It was created because the Realtors were calling themselves Realtors. No, we couldn't call ourselves. See, the Realtors is a trademark. It's patented. We thought Realtist was the most appropriate term.
There is nothing better than coming with your brothers and your sisters and sharing in education, sharing ideas, and knowing that you are considered the cream of the crop of minority real estate professionals.
NAREB president from 2007 to 2009, Maria Kong, joins a long line of past presidents who have built on the accomplishments of great leaders before them. Presidents like George Harris, 1953, the only president to serve 3 terms. Q.B. Williamson, 1963, who established NAREB's headquarters in Washington, D.C., a first for any trade association. Albert Johnson, 1987, who with Presidents Williamson and William Hamilton founded NAREB affiliate RIMBY, the Real Estate Management Brokers Institute. President Tom Holmes, 1985, opened brand new doors for NAREB in the nation's capital. And Evelyn Reeves, in 1989, became NAREB's first woman president.
It's really a family, and it's a family of opportunity. It's a family of education. It'll open your eyes to anything you want to do. NAREB really let me do, I could do and be the best of whatever I wanted to do. That's really what it was.
Because you are the key. Not only are you out there interacting and making these homeownership possibilities happen, and I know what your goals are.
Gaining access to power, NAREB led the fight for fair housing in America and would change the race game forever for Black homeowners and real estate professionals. NAREB, more than any other group, pushed for the Fair Housing Act of 1968. The groundbreaking legislation did away with legal barriers to Blacks moving into white neighborhoods, and the law made it illegal to discriminate against Black real estate professionals. NAREB's Atlanta board, the Empire Board of Realtists, won a landmark lawsuit filed in the 1980s that went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. The ruling made it illegal for the Multiple Listing Service, or MLS, to require agents be a member of the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, to use the MLS advertising service. Realtists and any other qualified agent were now able to join.
Sorry, I was still muted getting into the video. Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank CAAR for inviting us to participate in the second event with you guys. We really appreciate the collaboration, and we're excited to be here today because Leslie and Virginia Realtors has been a great supporter of Realtist Chapter Richmond, so we're happy to be a part of this event. As you can see from the video, we've been around for 74 years. A lot of people haven't heard of NAREB, but we are the oldest African-American trade association. And for the last 74 years, our mission has been promoting democracy and housing. We have 75 active chapters in the United States and one in Ghana. How we promote that democracy and housing is through programs geared toward multi-generational wealth, government relations and advocacy, diversity and inclusion programs. We are a faith-based organization. So we have faith-based programs and programs for small businesses. Our chapter, the Realtist Chapter Richmond, meets every third Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. And right now we are still meeting virtually due to the pandemic. So, and a small fact, our association name is National Association of Real Estate Brokers, but you do not have to be a real estate broker or even African-American to join our association or our chapter. We are interested in anyone who's interested in fighting for democracy and housing and helping us to achieve our goal. So anyone that has that same interest and heart is invited to join us. You can join one of our meetings. We'll happily have you join one of our chapters, because we're always looking for members and someone that's interested in fighting with us. Right now, we have programs, we have sponsors such as Wells Fargo, Bank of America. As I mentioned, Virginia Realtors is one of our sponsors, Virginia Housing. Right now, we have been doing some webinars, a web series with Virginia Housing. We have another one coming up in September. And that one is going to be on insurance and estate planning. So we're just out here trying to build that multi-generational wealth and inform not only consumers, but also realtors. So if anyone is interested in joining us at any time, please feel free to reach out to us. And again, we thank CAAR for inviting us to participate again, and we look forward to more collaborations with you guys. Now I would like to pass it on to our chaplain, Pamela Westbrook, who's going to start us off with prayer this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Let's pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, we do bless you and thank you that you have allowed us to see a brand new day and allowed the sun to shine. We thank you for every leader. We thank you for our sponsors, our presidents, our hosts today. And we ask that you would guide us, direct us, lead us, help us to enlighten our minds to understanding and opening of this discussion that we're having today, that we may have clarity and that we may live and abide peaceably with one another, both professionally and socially. As you direct us, we thank you. Right now, we thank you even for the new networking and possibilities and friendships even that may develop, the relationships that develop as we continue to collaborate and have these various meetings throughout the nation. So we bless you and thank you now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Patrina and Chaplain Westbrook. We appreciate that. CAAR and NARAD Realtist Chapter of Richmond have decided to raise money during this session for Hand Up Community Resource Center. This organization aspires to build a bridge of support for those in crisis by working towards long-term solutions that promote stability. Hand Up Community Resource Center embraces a philosophy that strives to provide support and direction to whoever, whenever, and wherever. A GoFundMe link will be shared in the Zoom chat window throughout this morning's session. Please consider making a donation of any amount. We appreciate it. We will now move on to today's event. Before working for Virginia Realtors, Leslie worked for 2 Virginia governors, applying her skills and passion to an array of policy initiatives from veteran and military issues to foster care. In her current role, Leslie focuses on issues impacting fair housing and property policy, as well as creates and leads the association's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Please know we will hold a Q&A session with Leslie after the presentation, so hold your questions until then. You may submit a question at any time using the Zoom chat window, or you can use the raise your hand symbol and we'll call on you at that time. We encourage you to please turn on your cameras during this session so that this will be an interactive presentation. Leslie, thank you for being with us this morning. I will turn this session over to you.
Thank you so much. And if the host could just make me a co-host so I could share my screen, that'd be great. But in the meantime, hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that introduction, and to President Beckham and President Tyree and all of the staff and volunteers that put this on. Thank you for having me. Again, my name is Leslie Frazier, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Community and Industry Relations at Virginia Realtors. I do wear a number of hats, but I primarily lead our association's diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So, I know we're going to have a formal Q&A session at the end, but given the topic of discussion, having difficult conversations around race or really any differences, I'd actually prefer for it to be a more interactive session. Keep in mind, I can't see the chat, so anything that's put in there would have to wait until the end, but I plan on asking you all a couple of questions throughout, so please feel free to do the same. So just want to go over just a couple of expectations and overview for today. Again, I do wish for this to be a more open conversation. It's a requirement in order to talk about anything that's difficult. So please be open today. I'm also going to just do a quick review over diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what exactly they are again and why it's important, and ultimately leading into our main discussion of how to have difficult conversations. And once we know some key steps to do that, how can we be change agents, not just in the real estate profession, but in our everyday lives? And then we'll have some formal questions. I'll be completely honest, the difficult conversations, it's something that I'm still struggling with, right? It's not an easy thing. It's something that, I think we often think too much about, or maybe we try and avoid conflict because we don't want to offend anyone. So the steps that I'm going to go over are things that I am actively practicing myself. So if you feel like, man, I really don't know sometimes how to approach a hard conversation, you are not alone in that. So just to kind of do some recap of what diversity, equity, and inclusion are, this picture of puzzle pieces all represent different elements of diversity. I think we often talk about race when we talk about diversity, but age, religion, thought processes are all elements as well. And the puzzle pieces are all separate, as you can see, but for inclusion to happen, you really have to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But my favorite way to describe diversity and inclusion is this quote from Verna Myers: diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. Definitely makes me think of high school prom, where if you went to your prom and you were a wallflower, or maybe you sat the whole night, you were there, but you didn't really feel included or engaged in the event. Whereas if someone invited you on the dance floor and you danced the night away, you probably felt like it was the best time of your life, right? So proponents of diversity and inclusion really want to be invited to the party and asked to dance. But the E portion, the equity, is really best described by these two pictures. So equality on the left is giving everyone the same thing. And it seems fair in theory, but it really only works if people are in the same place to start. And as you can see, everyone on the left side of the screen all have different heights and different abilities. So giving them the same size box doesn't allow them to all see the soccer game. Whereas equity is giving everyone access to the same opportunities. So it doesn't matter your ability, your height, and whatnot. The folks on the right are all given access and the ability to see the game. All right, so let's jump right into it. How do we have difficult conversations about race or any differences for that matter? This is so important for us to be better real estate professionals, leaders, human beings overall. And it's definitely not easy. If it were, we'd do it all the time. And stakes are high when we do it. So if you worry about saying the wrong word or phrase or give the wrong look to someone, it could be triggering. And I get it, I feel that way too. But I'm going to go over 6 key steps to having difficult conversations. So the first one is being open. I think if you worry too much about walking on eggshells with a conversation, you probably will. So be open to hearing different perspectives and sharing some of your own. Lean in with a genuine attitude and willingness to learn. Come to the conversation with curiosity, but also focus on what you're hearing, not what you will say next. The elders in my family would always say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You're supposed to listen more than you speak. And I think with difficult conversations, people often spend so much time thinking in their head about, well, what will I say next? What should I say? How do I not offend someone? That they're missing out on the listening. Listening is important to being open. And of course, when we talk about DEI conversations, we often talk a lot about biases. Step 1 when you're having a difficult conversation is to check your biases and leave them at the door. It's the only way to truly be open. So the next step is acknowledge and validate. You can't talk about an issue and move the needle forward until you acknowledge that it exists. This is an essential step. Think a lot about the social unrest that happened last year, particularly with the murder of George Floyd and the charges of emotions and feelings that were happening, right? Well, in order to understand different people's perspectives, you have to acknowledge that their feelings exist and that they're valid. And you have to respect others' points of view, no matter how different they may be. I'll give an example. I serve on the Virginia board for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's the largest suicide prevention nonprofit and research organization. And I am a straight female, and one of my board members is transgender, female to male. And I had never really learned or really talked to anyone about issues impacting the trans community prior to being on that board. It was a conversation that I just never had or just was never privy to any of the issues. And in talking to my fellow board member, he and I would share a lot of our different perspectives, and I learned a lot about the different experiences that he's had, especially during his transition. And I also met his partner, and they shared a lot of the same things with me. And it was just a real opportunity for me to listen and learn about a different perspective. I'm still learning. I know that it's not something I will ever personally understand from a personal perspective, but the more conversations you have and the more you respect others' points of view is key. So just kind of a question to the group, when was the last time you talked with someone from a completely different perspective and experience? How did you handle it? Were you open? Did you all come to a consensus or maybe agree to disagree or have an understanding of each other? Or was it, maybe the two parties didn't quite check their biases and maybe the conversation didn't go as well as you thought? I think this is something we think about or don't think about doing often, but how often do we really step outside our comfort zone and ask others about their experiences? So open question to the group to think about the last time you just had a conversation with someone totally different from you and how did it go? And I'll jump in once. And I see some things in the chat, but keep in mind, because I'm sharing my screen, I can't read it.
I'll go.
Hey, Donna.
I had a phone call from someone who always viewed me as a helping person because they were extremely upset because they were having a gender identity problem. And, it was like, why am I getting this phone call? And it was, I honestly had no idea what to say, and I've got a mouth, I'm telling you. I can usually talk to anybody about anything. But I did listen. And as the voice went on, which was quite emotional, the person was quite agitated, I started asking questions to figure out what was the problem. And I discovered what was going on with that person. And I knew that I wasn't able to help. So I just encouraged them to call me anytime they wanted to and ask me anything they wanted to. I was just like non-judgmental, and that's what I tried very hard to do. But I'll tell you, it was hard. It was really hard.
I bet, especially if you're, have never encountered that kind of situation before, you don't quite know what to do.
Luckily I had, because I have a long-term real estate client, a couple that he is a cross-dresser, and she's not any part of that, but she accepts him that way. They're married, and he wanted to have a sex change operation, and she kind of shared a lot of what was going on with her just because I knew them. And I knew them both. And so that was a long time ago, but I was really happy I had that experience because I was able to at least be open to what they might be going through. But it was hard. I'm telling you, it's hard.
I know when we're encountered with things that we don't understand personally or maybe have never experienced personally, but it sounds like you created an open space and a safe space for the individual to ask you questions or just vent, right? It sounded like you acknowledged and validated.
I tried to do. And I think on the phone, sometimes it's harder than if it's face-to-face. But it probably might happen more on the phone than it does face-to-face.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think people will bring things up when they are really uncomfortable in their place. I'm usually so open. If I'm uncomfortable, I say so, but not everybody's like that.
Right, they're not. But it definitely sounded like you respected the point of view, acknowledged and validated the feelings. So that's important. Anyone else have an example of talking to someone just with a completely different perspective?
I think over the last 2 years, I've had so many conversations around social equity, and particularly in Charlottesville around issues of race. And I'm having to train myself on how to be a better listener, because I think one of our first reflexes is to tell stories about ourselves about how we relate, how we understand,
Mhm.
how, yeah, I've been through something like that too. And none of that stuff is accurate. You know, if you really pay attention and you stop yourself from doing that, you realize that it is something totally different. And maybe you've been given a different flavor of the coffee, but it's not the same coffee.
Mhm.
I think it's been really, the more I've been able to not try to insert myself, then the other side realize it makes me seem less defensive, because I'm not trying to say, well, gosh, all this stuff about race is terrible, and let me tell you how I relate to sort of prove that I'm not a racist. I don't think that's the issue at all when we're talking about this. And when people are relating their stories, they're not trying to call you into question necessarily, but it's important to sit back, listen, develop that relationship. And once you might be in a space where you have somebody that you have that transparency, then maybe you can have that back and forth. But in those initial conversations, recognize that, much like Donna was saying, people come from places that we cannot understand.
Mhm.
Us listen and believe. And if you listen and believe, then as you move forward, you have an opportunity to react in a different way, recognize things that you think that you didn't really choose to think that way for a bad reason, but it could still be wrong, and you still might have to adjust it, and build a better understanding of how to be an active participant in the cause of equity and diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he made a really good point about everyone, particularly in Charlottesville, trying to show that they're not racist.
Mhm.
And, you know, I have to admit, I grew up in the South, man, and, you know, I think it helped that I taught in public schools and an all-Black school. I think it helped me to understand some things, but that and understanding white privilege, and that is being denied, and to find ways to talk about that without offending the person or putting them on the defensive. You know, I think the comment I don't know who was talking because it's not showing up on my screen, but the comment of practicing listening more, I think, is what I really needed to hear. I needed to hear that. But I think those two things of everybody trying to prove they're not racist, whether they are or not, but trying to prove that they're not, and then trying to get everyone to acknowledge white privilege are two hard things for me to deal with.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the trying to prove you're not racist or not discriminatory, to kind of one of my earlier points, you think so much about these thoughts in your head that you're not able to actively listen. And you're so worried about what you might say out your mouth that you can actively hear what someone else is saying, which is a great segue into the third step, which is being understanding, right? It's hard to understand someone else's experiences if you haven't experienced it yourself. But try and put yourself in the other person's shoes. You know, envisioning what someone else is going through and listening as they're sharing it will just help you be better in understanding. You know, talked about being a good listener earlier, but this is something that you can't just do once. You have to do it ongoing. You have to be an active listener and make it a habit. So the fourth step is being diverse and inclusive in your discussions. You know, if you always talk to the same people with the same views as you, I mean, you'd probably have a lot of agreements, but you wouldn't really get many places. You know, if I only talk to Black people about race, or I only talk to millennials about issues impacting different generations, you know, I wouldn't get very far. I wouldn't have a lot of different perspectives. So the same is the case in any difficult conversation. You know, ask open-ended questions where the person on the other end can provide insight. You know, maybe they can talk about experiences they've had with racism or discrimination or any kind of bias, and then ask that person if there was a time when they were felt included. How did it make them feel? Did they feel more successful as opposed to being excluded? You know, by doing this, we can actively try and foster inclusion, and that's going to come with talking from people who are different than you. Step 5. So find the things you have in common, age, race, gender, all of the above make us different from one another. But at the end of the day, we're human beings. And I think a good segue into having a difficult conversation is just taking the time to get to know the other person you're talking to, whether it's someone totally new or whether it's a colleague you've known for 5 years, but maybe you never really took the time to ask them where they're from or things that they like. I think finding things to lighten the mood, things you have in common will just make difficult conversations easier. During the pandemic, I personally think it's been a really good year and a half for television. I think there have been some great shows that have dropped, mostly on Netflix, because that's my primary channel or platform that I use. But I'm in Facebook groups from people all over the world, and we're bonded by the same show. So we're so different from each other. But this commonality we have, our love for a sitcom, brings us together. So definitely ask other people's interests and find the things that you have in common. So step 6, and I think if I had $1 for every time my mom told me this as a kid, I'd have an early retirement. But it's not always what you say, but how you say it. I found this quote that 10% of conflicts are due to difference in opinion and 90% are due to the wrong tone of voice. How many of us can relate with that? A negative tone or attitude can make a great input or a great statement that someone makes just totally fall on deaf ears. How many times maybe have you seen a colleague and it's like, okay, well, here comes so-and-so, she or he is always this way. They're always angry. They're always critical. So anything that they say, you may automatically have a bias or not listen because of how it comes across. And then for that individual, they may wonder, well, man, I'm saying some great stuff, but why is no one listening to what I'm saying? Why is no one heeding my advice? Well, how are you saying it? So the tone is key. And don't sugarcoat, but be mindful of your words. I think often to this example of slavery when I think of this. So, maybe someone thinks that Black people often bring up slavery and that it's time to move on. Well, instead of saying, I don't get why you people are always talking about slavery. It ended over 150 years ago, get over it. Versus saying, hey, I've noticed that Black people often talk a lot about slavery. And I know it ended over 150 years ago, but I want to understand more of why it's a trigger or why it's still an issue. Can you shed some light on that? To the former scenario, I wouldn't even engage in a conversation with that person. I would think, okay, he or she always has their mind made up. They won't be receptive to what I'm going to say. It's just going to result in a conflict. So why would I even talk to that person? Whereas the latter example, I would gladly have a conversation with that person. And I'd probably say, hey, that's a great and valid question. There are a lot of systemic issues today that stem from slavery, even though it ended several decades ago. I, for example, as a lighter skinned, mixed race, Black woman, am treated better today than a lot of my darker skinned friends and colleagues. And why is that? Well, during slavery, the lighter skinned slaves worked inside of the house and the darker skinned slaves worked in the field. It was a system in place to foster that kind of exclusion that went on for hundreds of years and sadly still exists today. And, the tone that was initiated at the beginning of that conversation would allow us to have a real conversation about it and learn each other's perspectives and views. It kind of reminds me of if you injure yourself, the injury, scraping your knee happens in an instant, but the recovery process, the time for your scars to heal, if they do, takes time. So same with issues that have happened in the past, things that went on for years are not just going to magically disappear overnight. It all takes time. And then I kind of want to, this is a 7th step, if you will, but just honorable mention and why the phrase, I don't see color, is offensive. Some of my closest friends, colleagues, mentors are white, but on occasion I've heard some of them say, hey, well, I don't see color. And I used to never know how to respond to that. All I knew is it made me feel uncomfortable. It felt like nails on a chalkboard. And I'd feel like, well, if you don't see color, you don't see me. I'm very proud of my Black and Korean identity. It's woven throughout who I am as a person, from food to music to overall culture. So for someone to say, hey, well, I don't see color, I'd feel like, well, man, you don't see me. So next time, if someone has used that phrase or maybe didn't realize that it was offensive, try and saying, hey, I see you and I want to learn more about you and your experiences. So all of this, learning how to have difficult conversations, really yields in us being allies and agents of change. And I want to talk just really quickly about 3 things that will help us be those allies and agents of change. So the first is ask questions, don't assume. One of my favorite old colleagues used to always tell me, Leslie, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And I really learned quickly there, man, well, I can't take what I've seen on TV or the one conversation I had with a person of a similar group or background and assume the same for all. I've had someone recently ask me, hey, I don't know, do I say Black or do I say African American? And I refer to myself as Black, and most people I know do. But at the end of the day, just ask the question and have that person provide insight so you're not assuming. The second thing is to be intentional. You have to actively practice all of the things we've discussed, especially the listening portion. And you have to get used to having genuine conversations. In order for any of these efforts, diversity, equity, and inclusion, anything to be successful, the efforts have to be intentional and you have to actively do it. And then at the end of the day, keep in mind, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Things will take time. The more partnerships between, let's say, local associations and NARAB or other multicultural organizations, the more history you learn about what's in your own backyard. The more that you do this, the better things will get. And it didn't happen overnight, so it's not going to change overnight, but definitely keep the momentum going. I'm going to stop talking because I think I've talked enough. And I definitely want to take questions from the group. Please feel free to just ask anything, even if you feel like, well, this is a dumb question. Like, I'm the only one who doesn't know this. Well, you never know. Most of the time, someone else may have the same question as you. So this is my contact. I will also put it in the chat, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see what's happening in the chat and kick it back over to ask Lisa to see what questions there may be.
Thank you, Leslie. At this time, we're going to open the session up to Q&A. Leslie, I know you have a few questions that were previously submitted for today's sessions. Let's go ahead and address those first.
Are they in the chat or?
Well, they should have been provided, but I don't mind reading them out if that helps.
Oh, great.
All right. These are some of the questions that were previously submitted. So how do you engage someone who isn't forthcoming to participate in D&I, meaning diversity and inclusion discussions?
That's a great question. And I will say, I'm going to answer all of them, but if anyone else has insight, we're all friends here, please jump in. So, I think it's how you approach the conversations about DEI. Most people who aren't engaged think it's all about race. They think, oh my gosh, I'm tired of being called a racist, or I'm tired of feeling like I have to pay for things that people did before I was even born. And it's, what is DEI at the end of the day? It's in real estate. How do we make sure that we are being representative of the populations we serve? Demographics change, needs of clients change. A pandemic happens and we all have to change to be virtual. It's about being adaptable. And at the end of the day, it's about making sure that you can provide the best services to potential home buyers in real estate, right? Or just being able to learn of different experiences and different cultures and different views is just going to make you more well-rounded as a person. So for those who are really not big proponents of DEI, I usually just kind of start with asking them what they think it is. And usually it's, oh, well, it's all about race and it's all about color. And I'll say, well, that's a factor. But back to the puzzle pieces earlier, there are a lot of different elements to diversity.
And if you don't mind me adding a little bit too, I think,
of course,
I think when you are white, this becomes an uncomfortable topic because you're feeling blamed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just really encourage you to separate blame for the issue from responsibility for helping fix it. There are many things that we did not personally do that we are nevertheless responsible to make better and to help work towards improving. And so if at any point you're feeling uncomfortable, try and remember that blame's not what anybody's trying to assign when they're having these types of conversations. What we are trying to remind people is responsibility. And we have had such opportunity to improve our own lives. And with that comes the mission to help others improve, help provide opportunity, and help provide equity. And so just really bear in mind that when you're in positions of power, authority, leadership, you accept responsibility for these sorts of issues. And this issue, particularly in Charlottesville, although very stark, is not different from any of the other issues we accept responsibility to change. If there's a car accident on the freeway and there's no ambulances, we stop and help. This is what we do. And this is just something that we're learning more about, so we know better how to help. And I would encourage you to sort of help set your brain on that. When you're participating in these discussions, it really lowers the adrenaline and helps you be a better listener and a better participant. And I know several people on the call know this already. As you start to engage with people, I find myself actively asking, hey, I think this, and this. What's wrong with this? And should I never say this out loud again because it's wrong? And I've had people correct me, and I really appreciate it. And it's really been helpful in getting more understanding of a perspective that's not one I grew up with. And I think that's what we're working towards in many ways.
Definitely. And Quinta, I'm so glad you mentioned that. It made me think of, I just put it in the chat, one of my favorite quotes from Desmond Tutu, the theologian and South African apartheid activist. But yeah, if you're neutral in situations of injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. And I think for those of us who are more privy to, whether it be better circumstances or who have seats at the table or in our inner room and can have be a voice for the voiceless, it's our job to do that. I think we should stand up for the little guy, no matter what the situation may be. And I think oftentimes when it comes to racial issues, if there's not a perspective of a person of color or even anyone from an underrepresented group at the table, but those of us who maybe aren't in said represented group understand the issues of that group and see that something is happening that is negatively impacting that group, we should say something, we should speak up. But you'll only know how to do that if you have had the conversations and can understand the perspectives of someone different from you.
Okay, I have another question. And we can go back and forth between someone interjecting with questions or handle these as pre-existing questions. Someone asked, can you touch on your why brokers are essential to successful diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts blog post? Why you wrote it, key findings, research involved, key takeaways, and member response to the blog post.
Sure. Yeah, I saw that in the handouts, which is pretty awesome. And we did a Broker Plus event in April, and I believe it's recorded on our website somewhere. I'll find it and share it so it can be distributed with you all. But I gave a whole presentation on this, but I'll kind of summarize it just now. So I've been in my role, it'll be a year on September 1st. So still new, still learning a lot. But after being on the job for a few months, I said, okay, well, where is that sweet spot that we need to hit in order to foster more DEI in what we do? And I realized it's the brokers, because in our association, one of our goals is diversifying our volunteerism. And pretty much everyone I know that volunteers in some level at the association, I asked them, well, how did you get involved? And they said, well, my broker told me to, or my broker took me to this event, or my broker is the one who saw leadership potential in me and told me to get involved. And then on the other side, I mentioned earlier about changing demographics. The home buyer demographics are changing. So how do we meet the needs of the new generation, the new clients, the new home buyers? Well, we have to be diverse. We have to be representative, and we have to know their needs and meet them where they are. And a lot of that, we don't do membership recruitment in the association, but brokers recruit agents and then can encourage or discourage them to get involved in the association. So if we recognize, hey, we live in an area, maybe it's a lot of UVA grads who are staying in Charlottesville. I went to UVA, didn't go that far, I'm in Richmond. But how do we meet the needs of the young folks who are graduating who could buy homes? Maybe we need some younger agents or more agents in our firms that can relate to those populations. Brokers have that authority and that power to recruit agents to meet the needs of the areas they serve. that's in summary what it is. And I call it the sweet spot, but Roxanne, I can resend that link. I know it was in the handouts, and I'll find where exactly it is in our presentation, but that's really where it's key, at least from the folks I've talked to who got involved. And for those of you who volunteered the association, how did you learn about it?
I think this opportunity for diversity is such a cogent topic because it really does require intentionality. If you read studies from Harvard School of Business, diverse businesses, diverse in gender and diverse in ethnicity, perform better over the long run. They weather crises better, and they are more profitable businesses. So if you're even being completely selfish, you're better off having a diverse business than not having one. And, you know, I think for years now, Lisa and I have had so many conversations about intentionality and diversity, often just sitting in my office where it's just the two of us. And it really does require some effort. You know, I can remember making a decision, we're going to have a more diverse brokerage because all my agents look the same. And I happen to be gay. And during this time of wanting to hire different races and different ethnicities, I failed completely. And without trying, 3 people that were not straight joined my firm. And so I had a conversation with them about, you know, well, what brought you here? And the response was, well, you're the broker, so we figured it would be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an eye-opening statement. And, you know, we've continued working and we're achieving a much more diverse agent mix and a much more diverse face, which I'm really happy about. But it's not simple when you've got years of attracting people that are like you, because that's the natural path of things. You have to make a decision. You have to be intentional, and it's work to have the natural stuff, but also the diversity that you want. Once you get over that, it does get easier once you get over that first sort of hill.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Quentin, because, you know, I know a lot of minorities do this. I know I do this. The first thing I do when I'm looking up maybe an organization is I go look at, okay, who are their staff or who are their leadership? When I was first approached to come to Virginia Realtors, that was the first thing I did. I said, well, let me go look at our leadership team and our staff. And I quickly realized I'm going to be the most senior person of color in the largest trade association in the state. And I think for a lot of people, that's scary. That's intimidating. That's, oh God, will I be able to relate? Will folks understand me? And I think for many, that's discouraging. For me, I took it as an opportunity to be able to pave the way and open the door more for others. And I've had people tell me, wow, I can't believe Virginia Realtors hired someone like you in a senior role. That kind of changes my view of the association. Or, wow, well, if you know, this millennial can do A, B, and C, well, maybe I can too. Or maybe I should go tell my kids that they need to think about joining real estate. You know, a lot of my friends, when I talk to them about buying homes, I'll ask them, hey, do you have a realtor? They're like, well, you know, I really want a Black realtor, or I really want an Asian realtor. But if they are looking at and don't see see them represented, it might discourage them from buying homes. So the more diverse we are, the more inclusive we are, it'll do nothing but grow our business.
Absolutely, absolutely. How do we initiate these types of conversations within our Charlottesville area brokerages that are less than diverse themselves, but serve a somewhat diverse community?
So I would ask the brokers, you know, what do they think some of the greatest issues are? Where do they think they may be lacking? What are untapped markets? And I don't know what the answers would be there. But some of them may say, well, you know, I lived in Charlottesville 4 years because I went to UVA. So there may be, oh man, well, we have a large Latino population over here, but no one is serving them. Or we've tried, but nobody speaks Spanish, or no one has a cultural understanding. Well, how do you create solutions around that? Well, let's go recruit folks who can meet the needs of those populations. Or, man, maybe we need to do a couple of events in Spanish, or maybe we need to go to the community where folks are and let them know, hey, we're the Realtor Association here and we're a force, and we want you all to know that we're here to support and we're a community partner. You know, how do you go meet folks where they are? I think that's it at the end of the day. And what are the means of marketing that? You know, I'm a millennial. If it's not on social media, I probably don't know about it. Or email, social media or email. But I don't have cable, so I don't cut on the local news to find out what's happening. So if we're like, well, man, we can't reach the young people, what are we doing wrong? Well, are you running ads in the paper or only running it on the local news? Or are you posting something on social media or going, I don't know, to the corner or somewhere where a lot of young folks are to meet them where they are?
Should all brokerages have these conversations willingly? And when they don't, what messages does that send?
One, yes, I do think these conversations should be had. And again, race is one thing, but it could be about so many other things. And then when they don't, you know, I was at a local association meeting recently, and one of the representatives there made a comment about how a lot of her agents of color left. And she didn't really see an issue with that. She just said, oh, well, I mean, I guess they wanted to go somewhere else. And my thought was, oh man, all of your agents of color left? That's not good. Why? Did they not feel welcome? Did they not feel comfortable? And where did they go? Did they go somewhere that felt like it was a more inclusive environment? So I think when you don't, you may be missing out on some real talent. You may be missing out on issues within your own organization or your own firm. And you may be realizing, man, well, maybe I have some biases that I need to check, which we all do. We all have those. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you know, diversity is good for business. Charlottesville's changing, Virginia's changing, and we can't operate the same way we did before, or we won't have lasting businesses.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Should CAAR take steps to educate brokers on recruiting and training practices that promote a more diverse realtor workforce? If not, why?
I think so, but I think the partnership should be two ways, right? Similar to the state association can't say, hey, locals, you need to do this and point the finger. I don't think a local association can go tell all their brokerages, you all need to do this. Mm-hmm. I think regular meetings, regular conversations, hey, we have a common goal of selling real estate and increasing home buying in our area. Well, how can we do that? And have the back and forth conversation. Hey, brokerages, what do you all need from the local association? What do we need from you all? What are ways that we can partner and only strengthen and enhance each other's efforts? And a lot of that is just going to be the relationship building, which can't happen without regular conversations and regular meetings. And it can't just be a, hey, we want something from you, so let's chat. It could be as simple as a, hey, just want to check and see how you all are going. You know, how are things in X neighborhood? What trends are you all seeing there? Hey, we have a chief economist at Virginia Realtors and she's drilling down data by zip code. We can share that with you. It's definitely the back and forth two-way partnership. And we do, by the way. Dr. Lisa Sturdivant is amazing and can do any and everything. So use us too.
She absolutely is amazing.
And as I look around at the cameras, I could try and tell you guys that I'm talking a whole lot because I'm president of CAAR, but that's not true. I talk a lot. As I look through the camera, I know we have so many brokers on that are really committed to diversity and equity. And I think fair housing lives within that. And so this is an easy conversation. Fair housing doesn't encompass it. Fair housing lives under it. And so I think this is an easy conversation.
I emailed Jason back and said, I'm still in my hotspot.
This is an easy conversation as a broker to start in your brokerage in ways that really are important to us legally, but also important to us in our commitment to community and our entire code of ethics and how it wraps around this topic.
That's an interesting point, Leslie, and I'd like for you to touch on that because I know that in other diverse DEI committees that I serve on, we've had that conversation about where fair housing fits into DEI. And it is a shared value, but it is not the same thing. It is not.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I mean, I think working to increase maybe volunteerism or working to increase more agents who can represent the populations you serve. I don't think that has anything to do with fair housing. And I think too often people loop the two together. I used to do this until I'd have conversations with folks at NAR and they're like, please distinguish the two. They're very different. But I think they are relatable because let's say if you foster an environment where conversations can be had, where people learn about differences and realize, wow, I didn't know this issue impacted that community, or I didn't know the history of X neighborhood and why people may be hesitant to go there or live there. When you're out in the field and you are working to check your own biases, then you will eliminate and automatically reduce the likelihood that you'll steer. So the two are related to each other. But, fair housing I like to think of fair housing as very legal and very gray, not black and white. And DEI is more like having conversations and getting to know people and their backgrounds.
Leslie, this is Tom Wolfick. I'm
Hey.
a bunch of people. I'm the face in the dark here. I have to say, I've been in this business 13 years. This year is the first time I've heard about NAREB, the fact that they even existed. Have no problem whatsoever with the fact that there's a companion group, with NAR, and I'm coming to understand the reasons why it came into existence and that sort of thing. Would like to know if there are any opportunities to collaborate more, other than joining. I know I could do that, but just our two groups, become more aware of each other and have more collaboration, because this is the strength of what we do. I could name a number of organizations that, CAAR and VR and NAR is involved with. I call them appendant bodies or side organizations, if you will. But just the fact that I'm just now finding out about the existence of NAREB, think we need to promote this more.
Yeah, Katrina, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a crack at it and then I'll kick it over to you if that's okay.
Okay.
So part of my role at Virginia Realtors is building relationships with the multicultural organizations and the chapters we have in Virginia. So I am a member of NAREB, and there are 3 chapters of NAREB in Virginia: Northern Virginia, Richmond, and Hampton Roads. I've talked to NAREB about this. I've talked to Katrina about this. I think a lot of it has to do with how it stemmed, the history. NAREB became an organization because Black people weren't allowed to be realtors back in the day. So it already started kind of with the divide. And I know the two have worked together. NAR is making a conscious effort to work more with the multicultural associations, and we're doing more at the state, but a lot of it is new. Organization's been around well over 70 years, but this emphasis on partnering is really recent. So one, I think, Tom, you and maybe many others hadn't heard of NAREB because the emphasis on the partnership is new. I think 2, the name, National Association of Real Estate Brokers. I have friends who are agents and they're like, oh, well, I can't join. I'm not a broker. And it's like, you can. So the more we learn, the more we can educate each other, the better. And the third point I'll say is, one beauty about COVID, which I'm trying to find more positives, it's hard. But one good thing about it is this Zoom presence, this virtual presence. The Richmond chapter and CAAR, an hour and 15 minutes away from each other, but via Zoom, you can hop on from any and everywhere. And I will say, not saying other local associations don't do this, because they do, but I haven't seen a local association partner more with a multicultural chapter than I have with you all. So you all are really leading the way a lot in that space. And I have to commend you for that. But Katrina, I'll shut up and I'll kick it over to you to talk more about that.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you again for being a member of NAREB. Tom makes a good point. There are other ways, like currently we have a great relationship that just came about with the Richmond Association. So there is not just being a member, although of course we welcome members, but we have been in talks with Allie, and I'm supposed to have a meeting with Quentin to discuss more ways that Charlottesville can partner, that we can partner with the Charlottesville Association. So we're looking forward to that. I see in the chat, Quentin put a Charlottesville chapter is on the way. That's news to me, because right now we just recently gotten our, well, I was getting ready to say our first Charlottesville member, but actually my mother, of course, Katie has always been a member for as long as the 9 years that I've been a member of NARAB. But I have in the past reached out to Charlottesville Realtors, but no one was interested. And I mean, I'm sad to say that I'm sad and happy. I'm sad for the reasons that more diversity and inclusive have come about. But I'm happy that it is bringing awareness to NARAB. I mean, it's, as I stated earlier, we've been around for 74 years, but a lot of people haven't heard about us. But I am happy that now that they have heard about us, that people are, I mean, every day I'm getting calls from people reaching out to us, wanting to be a part of NARAB and wanting to help us achieve that mission. So we're very excited and looking forward to working more with Quentin. And he's, like I said, he's reached out to me. So we're very appreciative of that. And once we get, I'm sure once we get more people in Charlottesville involved, maybe they will look at putting a chapter in Charlottesville. But right now, the Realtist chapter, Richmond, is the chapter that covers your area. So again, if anybody has any ideas on how we can collaborate, again, you don't have to be a member. You can join our meetings. You can share your ideas with me, and we'll be happy to collaborate with you guys without your membership. But just partnering, just to reach our goals is most important. We're not so much on, of course, we want members, but we're not driving membership as much as we're driving the democracy in housing. So we appreciate and look forward to working with you guys. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about NARAB? If not, I think our information, well, I'm sure our information, I appreciate Allie. She has been wonderful with working with us, and she shared our information in the with today's documents. And while I'm speaking, I also want to touch on, Leslie, I wanted to say, I appreciate you being with us today. One of the takeaways that I had, I think my main takeaway is that we need to be more open-minded. I think, to piggyback on what Quentin said, when it's uncomfortable for non-African Americans, I think that people need to realize that the conversation is also just as uncomfortable for us. It's not new to us, but it's new to us that people want to discuss it. So it's not easy for us to discuss it also. And then as far as, I think you touched on the tone, I think I will admit that I am guilty of judging people on their tone. And sometimes that's not even the case, because sometimes I'll be like you said, it's like, oh, here they come again, and they sound negative. But then I found out that that's just them and that's just their personality. So it's not that they're trying to be negative. So I think one of the things we need to do is to not judge people and to be more open-minded. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, Patrina. I'm very bubbly. I like to smile. And when I meet people who aren't, I'm kind of like, oh, well, maybe I avoid the people. But to your point, when you realize, okay, so-and-so doesn't have an attitude per se, it's just how they are. It's their demeanor. But you wouldn't have known that if you didn't get to know them a little bit, right?
Exactly.
So, that's definitely key.
So Leslie, this is Donna Patton. Hi.
Hey, Donna.
So I really think it's important for realtors to understand that their education goes beyond just what we need to do to sell real estate and to be a realtor. It's very important for us to learn everything we can about our industry, what our industry did, the color of law. I push that book a lot because it's a fabulous book. The Urban Renewal of Charlottesville, the book, that is another big eye opener. And I think that no matter who you are, you really need to understand where real estate came from and where it's going and help it get better. And, if you don't learn about the past, how can you change the future?
Absolutely. Well, and I love, the conversations that are being had now. So much is rooted in history, and we can point to evidence of things happening that are justifying what we're saying. It's not just someone made this up and is trying to push an agenda. these are historical facts. So I love the fact of backing things up with history and, not to dwell in the past, but to your point, Donna, you have to understand the past in order to know the present, where you are, and to move forward in the future. That's key. That's definitely key to these efforts.
Absolutely. This is a question that I can truly relate to. It was asked by someone early and presented. It says, how can I help people understand microaggressions without being seen as an angry Black woman or being accused of playing the race card?
That is a great question. Sadly, I think a lot of that stems from stereotypes. I think there is a stereotype that a lot of Black women are angry or, come across a certain way. And a lot of it stems from past experiences. If you've endured a lot of difficulty in your life or negative experiences with certain groups, you're going to approach what you say and how you react to things with that perspective. But I think a lot goes back to the earlier point about tone and approach. And I think so much about how you say it goes a long way. Two people could say the exact same thing, but if one of them says it very critical, very negative, and the other one says it from a place of curiosity, the reactions will be completely different. But I also think on the other end, for people who are maybe offended by something someone says, understand more of the history and the perspective that that person is bringing to the table. It's probably not random, and maybe you can catch someone on a bad day, but it usually has some historical evidence behind that. And I think that's only going to come with the conversations, with having conversations, with getting to know different people's perspectives and experiences. I will say, I tend to fall on I can be effective in getting points across, but I tend to be really, really nice. Sometimes I wish I could be a little more, not mean, but a little forceful. But for others, that comes naturally. But I think it's about practicing. It's about having the conversations. It's about talking to each other. But I will say, just from experience, if you have a negative tone or approach to something, sadly, you just won't be as well received. And regardless if you're Black, white, Asian, whatever, that's just a fact. And I welcome anyone else to weigh in on that, because that's something where the perspective is different depending on who you are and your experiences. I made a comment earlier about kind of colorism with my slavery example. Being that I'm lighter skinned and mixed race, I'm treated differently. It's sad, but it happens.
Hey, Leslie, Bert Corley with Keller Williams Alliance. I'm the new guy in the shadows. But I'm also a local area pastor, and I think one of the things when we're trying to have these conversations, and I know we have this difficulty even with conversations of faith and speaking with people who may not be people of faith. And my go-to thing is, am I trying to win an argument or am I trying to win a relationship? And so I think when we're having these conversations, we need to realize understand what it is we're trying to accomplish, right? I'm trying to build a relationship with this person, regardless of whatever differences we may have. And so do I want to win the relationship, or is it more important for me to win the argument? And if I want to win the argument, then I shouldn't even be having the conversation. So to me, that's kind of what our approach needs to be in any of these discussions that we have. Is it about the relationship, or is it about being right? That's my 2 cents. I'll shut up and go back to my seat now. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I think that goes back to the finding things you have in common. I'm a person of faith too, and I try and take the, love on everyone and do unto others approach to things. But if I'm talking to someone and we're not of the same faith, I'm not going to use faith as our commonality thing to kind of discuss. We'll find something else, and that's going to come with learning more about the other person. But I think that's important. The relationship building is key. Kelly, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to add in something. I'm appreciating this conversation and several things that you said. And I just wanted to add in something that's helped me, which is to recognize that as humans, it's kind of human nature, whether you're Black or white, whatever color, just as a human, it's our nature to feel comfortable with people who are the same. people who we have some commonality with. And while that has allowed us to survive for a long time, to stay with your band of your tribe and not be overrun by the other tribe or get, killed by the tribe that hates you, right? We have to recognize that at this point in history, we have to override that instinct in order to thrive as a community. There's a difference between surviving and thriving. What we've been doing is surviving, and now to thrive, we need to actively override that instinct, and that's hard to do, and it's really hard to do, and it was hard for me until I could distinguish that, oh, that's my instinct. And so I appreciate a lot of the things you've said about, we can look for other things that we have in common besides race or religion, or we have something in common. Anyway, a great thing to be doing on the anniversary of August 12th, and I appreciate it. I have to run off to an appointment, but thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I love that, surviving versus thriving, and the timeliness of this conversation. As I mentioned to you all, I went to UVA, and after the white supremacist rally 4 years ago, a lot of us alum rallied together, Black alum, and said, okay, we've got a lot of parents about to send their kids off to Charlottesville, and we need to rally and let them know they're not sending their kids off to a white supremacist bubble.
Right. Right.
And
remind them that the white supremacists came from outside of Charlottesville.
Right.
It was the people of Charlottesville who stood up and opposed them. Yes.
Exactly. That was a big point of what we made. But then it also kind of, people were saying, oh, well, the same thing might happen in Richmond. It's like, well, it wasn't really successful in Richmond. What was it about Charlottesville that made it a grounds for people to rally like that? I mean, it resulted in a lot of community conversation, but I remember a lot of us alum, like either physically going or writing letters or doing calls just to let parents know you're not about to send your, 18-year-olds into a dangerous place.
And the statues are all gone. Hallelujah.
Keith, do you have your hand raised, or I see it? Everyone's shifting on my screen. So
Keith Smith has his hands raised.
Okay.
Maybe
Please speak a little louder.
No.
Keith?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me
Hey.
okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. I'm Keith Smith with Keith Smith Realty, and I am a member of NARAB and the Richmond Association chapter. And I'm really, really enjoying this conversation. It's, quite timely and quite needed. One of the things I would like to add is that something I call discretionary power. I think every group within the group, I think you have discretionary power within your own group, whether that group be African American or Caucasian or Asian. Within your group, you have power to be able to use at your discretion when you hear things being said that should not be said, that you carry a lot of weight within that group. I am a man, and within the men group, I have power. And when I hear something disparaging about females within my group, I have the power to say something within my group. And I think that power is something that we don't exercise enough within our own group. And I think it should be exercised more. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. It made me think of some of the comments earlier about white privilege. It's not saying, oh, you're white, you grew up rich and all sorts of stuff. It's not saying that you didn't grow up without some adversity, but it's just saying, just maybe by nature of your position or your race, comparable to the male-female example that Keith just mentioned, maybe in a room or in a position where you can speak up on behalf of a group that cannot.
And I would encourage you, I was thinking of microaggressions in total. Find somebody that you can be transparent with, that can be transparent back, because I think it's hard for somebody who is a person of color to speak out against the microaggressions. But if I have somebody that's helping me recognize it, that's helping me recognize my implicit bias, then I have an opportunity to speak out in a way where nobody has to come across as the angry Black person. I can be an agent for change, and I can use that discretionary power that you talked about and be responsible for the change without being blamed, and use that to step forward.
Yeah, definitely, that's key. You know, one group or one protected class can't win the fight alone. You know, the allies and then ultimate change agents are key to this.
And I got to tell you, like growing up in Southern California, in the subgroup that I'm in, all that stuff, I tend to think of myself as being aware and knowing this stuff. And we're not. You may know a piece because of where you come from. You don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so be open that there's more to learn, there's more to understand, and there's more listening to be done.
Definitely.
Okay. I have another question that I find very relevant and a good question to ask at this point in the conversation. Do you have any tips on combating activism fatigue among white people and others who are not inherently negatively impacted by systematic racism? Activism fatigue.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely real. I would initially answer that kind of like I answer anything else. If you're tired, whether it be from work, volunteering, whatever, just kind of take a break sometimes to step back and do some self-care. I think if you're constantly in the trenches, fatigue is inevitable. So just definitely take some time to step away and step back. But also, I think just continue to have the conversations and understand why the activism is still happening. You know, if all the issues were resolved, you wouldn't still have people fighting certain fights. So it's definitely evident that there are still issues, there are still challenges. We're making progress, but we're not there. So at the end of the day, you have to remind yourself why this is happening. But I'm a big proponent of self-care. You know, I talk about race a lot and it's tiring. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I just need to go binge a TV show. That's self-care for me, or take a trip. But then remember, okay, it's still a fight at the end of the day. There's still work that needs to be done. So I'll take a break, but I got to get back in it when I come back.
But it's also around the understanding that African Americans are not responsible for finding the solution. And a lot of times when you have conversations like that, people who are not of color can lay that burden down at our feet to be the solution, or to say, all right, now we're having these conversations, now help us get there. That's fine, but not everybody's going to be able to do that because of the fatigue. And so it's going to be a collaboration. So understand that. So when you have an African American who is willing to step up and be actively a part of the process, that's a privilege, because we do this each and every day, and it can become exhausting when you feel like you're not making strides. So that's how I interpret the activism fatigue. It is 100% real. And yes, we do have to get in there and fight, but not everybody's going to be up for that because we do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so
this is where talking to different people is key, because we all have different perspectives, different experiences. You know, I'm a little younger, so I don't have a lot of the fatigue that, say, my parents did, or of different perspectives where you're from. I mean, definitely don't talk to one person from one protected class and think, okay, I've got an understanding of the whole culture or the whole race. We have differences amongst each other, just like everyone has differences. And I haven't checked out that book, Janice, but it looks good. I'll have to check it out. Thanks for sharing that.
Anybody else have any questions prior to me going to another previously submitted questions? Please jump in, make this as interactive as possible. Okay, I don't want to call on anybody, so I'll just go back to my next question. All righty. What are a few things that you appreciate most that your white or non-Black friends do in support of being anti-racist, besides posting on social media or an anecdotal story on something that was truly helpful?
I think the number one thing I appreciate the most is just maybe sometimes allowing me to vent or sharing my experience as a person of color. And for me to do that with someone who is not also a person of color means that I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I feel like there's a trusting and welcoming environment. I won't be judged. I can just be myself. And I think that goes across the board for anyone who's different, or any friendship or any relationship. If people feel like they can open up to you, there's an environment of trust there and a safe space. So I think that's key. The social media posts, I mean, yeah, we can share things in solidarity, but being able to talk to you about my personal feelings and beliefs and experiences is way better than a reshare on Facebook.
Okay, I'll just move on to the next one unless somebody else wants to dive in.
Yes, go ahead. I saw in the chat. Yeah, just to let your guard down and just be able to be yourself. I don't know how much you all know about this. I know a lot of people on this call will know, but code switching is essentially when a Black person or a person of color changes their tone of voice depending on who they're talking to. So typically it'll be a higher, maybe lighter inflection if you're speaking to a white person, and if you're speaking to a Black person or maybe another person of color, it may be more relaxed and you don't think about actively changing your speech. That's something that I've done a long time and it happens naturally. But for me to just be able to just talk and not change my voice, that means it's a comfortable environment. And it's sad that people feel like they need to change their speech in order to be accepted, but it happens.
100%, it is real. Code switching is real. And I was just explaining that to someone else, how real that is. Any additional comments?
I'm a person who has to code switch a lot. I'm very matter of fact in my speech. I'm very low key. I don't really get excited about a lot of things, but I find when I have difficult conversations, because I am so direct, it is not often well received. I'm one of those that's often accused of being an angry Black woman just because I'm so direct. So I find myself, and unfortunately, Leslie, I do not share your bubbly personality. I'm just real key. And for that reason, I find myself having to code switch almost anytime I'm interacting, outside my personal sphere, because I just, I've been accused of being intimidating or scary, which is amazing. But yeah, it's real.
Yeah, and that's mentally exhausting, for you to wake up in the morning, wake up, pray, use the bathroom, whatever you do, and then think, okay, I have this meeting today. I need to make sure I act or speak this way here, but in this one, I can be more myself. Like, it's exhausting. I do that every day.
Mask. It's like constantly having to put on a mask or put on an armor before you go out to face the world. And that is not a reality for a lot of people that don't look like us.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think I'm quiet. I'm not. It's just easier to not
say anything. Yeah.
It's less draining. I'm not a quiet person, just so you know.
Which I think is really sad, because in my brief experience with Janice, she's smart and she's been around a lot of associations and she knows how things work. And so I in the rare moments that I've been present where you've been talking and saying things, I'm really appreciative of it, because I think there's a lot of knowledge behind that.
Good stuff. Anyone have any questions about that particular kind of baby segue, or, to better understand kind of where that perspective is coming from?
Cool. And this is a safe place to ask questions that you wouldn't normally ask. This is definitely a safe place. So feel comfortable engaging.
So I will jump in on this. I think a lot of us, we have agents that are both sides of the mountain. Some have very Southern accents. And I think that a lot of times people hear other people and immediately get a mental picture of, oh, they're not smart, or they are this, or they are that, because of the way they sound, whether they have an accent, whether English is their first language, however. And so I do have to say, I've never heard of code switching, but it makes sense because of the way people perceive you. And I think it's a shame that we do this, and we do it mentally without even thinking about it. I was talking to my brother's fiance, and she said, you know, there's a person she works with, and she thought English is a second language for her. And she thought, oh my gosh, well, she's not smart. And then she started really talking to her, and she said, oh, she probably knows much more than I do. She's been to finishing school. Her parents did all this stuff with her. And now I feel like I'm the dumb one, not her. And so I think we all have to check that at the door and say, you know, I don't care how they sound. Let's see who they are.
I also think when we talk about this, and forgive me, I'm going to do the opposite of what I said before and use a personal example. If you go back in time and you were gay, we didn't call it code switching, it was the pronoun game. And so when your parents asked you who you were hanging out with, you never said he or she, it was, oh, they did this and we went there. Did you have a good time? Yeah, they're my good friend. You played the pronoun game and you slipped in it automatically. And you never out and out lied, but you never really told the truth. And the really sad part about that was how much of important parts of our lives we hid from our families and our friends and kept apart. And I think that's true here too. There's a richness to people that you will get access to if you can make them comfortable to be themselves. And so I think it is upon us in all of these relationships to develop that sense of trust, to develop that connection. And it's not going to happen because you put a sign on a door that says it's okay. It takes time, but develop that, because there's a richness and a deepness to their life you'll get to experience that is so valuable if you can do that and make it a safe space for everybody to be who they are and share their truth and their life with you.
That's
Absolutely.
exactly right point. That's a great point. Allow people to show up for who they are, their authentic self, not fitting into your particular perspective of who they should be to make you feel comfortable. That allow people to be authentic.
You
I
know,
have
I
another
also
question.
think,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Be interactive.
okay, yeah, I was listening to the comments there, and I really think the people that are different than me, that I consult with, that I use as advisors, that I have trusted relationships with, it's not about the doing. It's not about them doing something differently. I know they put forth some effort to do things and to get things done, but at a certain point, it changes from doing to being. I mean, it's like, this is who I am now, you know, and it's not about what I do, it's about who I am. And I think the more people concentrate on doing, then they're looking for a result. And it's like an automatic result that's going to happen from me doing something. Well, you keep doing and you keep doing, and if you're sincere about it, then at some point you're going to be. And that's who I am. And then once you be that person, then you're going to attract people who know who you are because they see who you are. You don't have to tell them who you are, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Okay. I think I have time for one more question.
Okay.
This one is, how do we start to have conversations around these questions and avoid leadership deflecting from the topics with standardized talking points as to why we should not engage in further conversations?
Now that one is tough because fortunately I am at an organization, at least now, that recognizes the importance of having this. And the folks at the leadership at Virginia Realtors really defer to me for a lot of this. So I fortunately have not encountered the, well, let's deflect or let's not be controversial. But I think when you do come across that, you've just got to keep pushing or find new ways to introduce the topic, find new ways at explaining an issue that's important and that needs to be addressed. You know, maybe race is sensitive, but we need to talk, well, how do we get more, I don't know, younger agents into our association? Another element of diversity that might be easier to swallow. And once you get people kind of trained and thinking about thinking outside the box, then you can introduce maybe the harder topics. But at the end of the day, it's just the conversations. I mean, a session like this that we've had where people can just kind of jump on and engage and just let their hair down, if you will, and just freely speak. I think you have to create that kind of environment everywhere.
Anybody else want to chime in and share? We're getting pretty close to time. We'll run over a little bit. I'm about to wrap up. This is going to be your last opportunity.
I'll also put my email in the chat again if you all have any questions or want to follow up, or I'll be visiting the Charlottesville area soon, probably in the fall. So I'd love to meet you all if it's safe someday.
I suppose I would just want to say and encourage people, you know, I'm involved in this, yes, because I'm president, but also because it's near and dear to me. I know that's, you know, Patrina's here because of our partnership with NAREB, but I promise you that most of the folks on this call live this every day. And you don't have to be a leader with a pen to be a leader and to be an agent of change. And so I would just encourage you all to embrace this. This is part of our code, but it's also part of our being human and embracing humanity. So don't feel like you need to work through somebody else. You can accept it if you can. Be your own leader in your own space.
I love that. Yeah, it starts small, you know, changing your circle, eventually changing a greater organization. And I'm an optimist, so eventually changing the world. One step at a time.
Absolutely.
But I thank you all so much for coming and engaging. And I love, not to be biased, but I love working with CAAR and the Realtist chapter of Richmond, because it's always an engaging group and there's definitely passionate folks who want to see the change happen. So I appreciate you all for being such a great group.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Leslie.
I'm going to wrap up by saying, Leslie, thank you again for being with us this morning. Your thought-provoking observations and questions have, again, made us be better. Patrina, would you like to share some last words?
Yes, thank you. I want to again thank Leslie for being here. I think the session was very engaging, very informative. Your sessions are always great and help us to keep an open mind. I think to piggyback on what Quentin said, I think, again, that's the first step, to keep an open mind and to start small. There's nothing that you can do that's too small to start the change. I see a lot of our Realtist chapter Richmond members on here, and I think I can speak for them in saying, again, it's been a great session. We look forward to more sessions like this and more partnerships with CAAR. It's been great for the two that we've done, and I look forward to working with you guys more. Also, I see Joni on here from Virginia Housing. We want to thank her for supporting us. They've been a great supporter of Realtist chapter Richmond. Again, we're doing webinars with them, and I'm sure they support CAAR also. So we just want to thank them. And again, we look forward to more partnerships like this. I do see Augusta Height on, who is the founder of Hand Up Community Resource Center. So if he could just say a quick few words to introduce himself and to thank everyone that was able to make a donation.
Oh, most definitely. Look, I feel like I need to make a donation to everyone. I forgot for a moment what I was doing because I was so engaged in the conversation. I would just like to thank you guys. I would like to thank the Realtist Association, NARAB, for supporting Hand Up Community Resource Center. And once again, Miss Leslie, this was very informative. I love the discussion. I feel like just listening in and hearing the conversation that we're kind of on the right track at Hand Up. We are a minority-led organization, nonprofit here in Richmond, Virginia. We work in the realm of three factors that contribute to an individual becoming homelessness: mental illness, substance abuse, and loss of wages and income. So we have a wellness center where we provide a food pantry for individuals who may be dealing with needs of food insecurity. But our mainstay for Hand Up Community Resource Center is what we have been able to do working with homelessness within the veteran community. We have brought 3 programs to Virginia, which are first-time programs in the Virginia area. One is our Transition in Place program, which has been published in the governmental white pages as being one of the best ran transition programs in the in the United States. We are now opening up Virginia's first veteran service center that would be an access point or a drop-in center, very similar to an emergency room triage, where veterans can come in without an appointment, with if they just want to come in out of the weather. In that program, we will be meeting individuals where they are and trying to help them to navigate to stability. So a lot of times we may be dealing with what we like to call the higher hanging fruit, those individuals who have chose to live in places uninhabitable for humans, but to develop that relationship with them to hopefully be able to help them move into housing. So when they come in, they can eat for free, they can take showers, they can wash their clothes, they can receive new clothing, and we will have VA peer navigators and social workers in the service center assisting them. So we will be working also just along the spectrum for veterans who are getting out of the military and say, hey, I don't know what is allotted to me. What should be my next step? Should I move into home ownership? What career can I choose? So the service center, we're hoping will make a huge splash and make a huge dent in what we do with our homeless population within our veterans community. Hand Up is the only minority-led organization that is a part of the Coordination of Care here in Richmond, Virginia. And the Coordination of Care is, Virginia Supportive Housing, St. Joseph Vila, who has done a great job with working with this population. And so networking and establishing relationships has been paramount in our ability to be able to reach our goals. So once again, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I would like to thank you guys for your time, and thank you for the wealth of information I was able to take part in today. And thank you for your donations.
Thank you, Augustus, for sharing that. And we certainly appreciate you being on the call today. And for everyone who was able to hang in there with us, thank you so much. We have definitely gone over our time, but it tells you the strength of this conversation and that it needs to continue. But before we end today's session, I just want to say thank you to those members who donated to Hands Up Community Resource Center today. Your donation has made a world of difference to someone. And again, thank you for joining us and have a great day.
Thank you.